Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 17 and 18. So getting back into these after taking a bit of a break to cover San Diego Comic-Con with all the Avatar panels. But yeah, just before we jump in, I'll just mention I do have a YouTube channel membership available if you'd like to help support the channel, also Patreon. And if you come in at the higher tier, you'll get early access to videos in this series as it goes on. But yeah, where we are here is, of course, we're jumping in immediately after the two chapters covering the date with Zuko, Jin's main appearance from the show. So chapter 17 kind of acts as like the aftermath to that. How does Jin feel after the date ends, and what does she decide to do afterwards, given that she's kind of proved a few things to herself on the date. Then 18 is actually more about the proper true introduction to what are these black market deliveries that Jin and Xuan are involved in. We finally get the introduction of the Silver Fangs. So an interesting group of chapters here, but we'll jump straight in here. So yeah, Jin's immediate reaction after the date is that even though it didn't turn out as I wanted to, I still feel lighter than expected. I had fun talking to Lee. The big thing here is just that she felt normal. She kind of proved to herself that she could be normal like all the other kids, and even though it wasn't this idea of like she found her one true love type thing, her thoughts are kind of, I suppose, echo kind of what Zuko felt afterwards. It was nice. They both kind of needed this for different reasons, but it wasn't the, you know, everything coming together moment for both of them, but it's still kind of memorable for both of them in their own way, which I think is kind of interesting. So she kind of feels more confident kind of coming out of this. She's proved some things to herself, and so she's set on what she's about to do next. And that is that she wants to figure out more about what are these deliveries about? What's this black market thing that Xuan is involved in? I want to find out kind of what he's hiding or is not able to tell me. She wants to prove that she can, you know, get involved, be a part of this, and be even better than anyone. And like, he has to listen to me, basically. So she approaches him at school, and in a way we get this interesting moment where kind of a lot of the stuff that maybe her preconceived notions about them ended up kind of being wrong. They were kind of right a little bit about kind of some of the stuff about her, in that, yeah, Renda's there, but you noticeably, again, Jang is not there, so they have kind of left him out of the friend group after he kind of was the one who instigated a lot of the issues in the earlier chapters. And they don't say anything to her. It's just like, hey, there's a little bit of discussion about like, hey, she's coming over to talk to him. And Jin more realizes that like, oh, like Xuan is like almost like the leader of a little group here at the school, and she maybe hasn't quite realized that before now. What faction is he a part of? But he gets up to go and talk to her. And this is where she does realize that like, oh yeah, he is the person I've interacted with the most at the school over these last 2 years. It is probably true that, you know, that what they said about me, that I was a bit of a kind of loner. I came off as kind of quite mysterious and kind of better than everyone because I did keep to myself. She never kind of purposely tried to do that, but just with everything going on in her life, that's the way it came across. And she kind of more realizes that this is how other people perceived her overall. So yeah, she just goes straight up to him and is like, I want to be part of whatever you're involved in. And he's kind of shocked at her kind of brazenness of just kind of coming up and asking, but he does try and he's kind of realistic about this ultimately. Like, are you sure you kind of know what you're getting into? Like, you have a job, you are aware it'll take up a lot of your time if you kind of get in deeper to this. And she finally actually tells him why she's so eager to do this, why she needs all the money. I give a brief summary of what happened so far and how it's important for me to get Susu back. It's not just about me. So he does kind of now know the kind of context, and he notes that like it is an astronomical fee. Like, you will need to put in a lot of work to get that much money. And because it's official Deng, yeah, there's no other way to get her back than paying out the contract. So she has to do this. So he kind of agrees with that. She says about like the overall organization, like, I know you're part of the black market somehow, but I don't know like the full scope, but I want in on this. He points out that he isn't the one who decides. So she asks, hey, like basically get me a meeting with your superiors. I want in. He kind of points out like, hey, are you sure? Will you be able to do it all? Like helping out at the bakery, going to school and all this other stuff. And she says, I'll drop out of school if I have to. I need the money more. And he is hesitant, and she kind of takes this as like almost like he doesn't quite believe that I have what it takes. But I do think there's a little bit of like he's kind of trying to be just respectful here in terms of, are you sure that this is what you want? Because if you go in on this, you have to go kind of all in. And he's just, don't be hasty, I think is more of his opinion, where she still thinks like he's maybe looking down on her a little bit, but she is focused. And he says, I will set up a meeting. And she kind of feels like she really needs to prove herself is the main idea. The end of chapter 17 is Jin goes back to Pao's tea house because she wants to kind of finally have a meeting afterwards with Lee. They note that it has been a few days since the date at this point, and she's been doing all the deliveries to the back door, so she kind of hasn't got to see him, basically. But then she finally goes in and is prepared to kind of maybe talk to him. What she wants to tell him is that she knows there isn't a connection between them, but maybe we could be friends. So she goes in. Manager Fung is the one to serve her, gives her the tea. She asks, where are Mushi and Lee today? Are they off sick? And he gets really annoyed and is like, those ungrateful newcomers. They were bought out from under my nose. Hard workers are so hard to come by these days. I have someone new starting tomorrow. Where did they go? And she notes like, I never got to say goodbye. I may never see them again. They got offered a residence in the upper ring, their own tea house, when I already gave them freedom to do whatever they want here. So this is where she notes that like it's rare, but some of us do achieve our dreams. Like that this was Mushi's dream. This is what he always wanted, was to name his own tea house. And he gets that. She's happy for him. But then she kind of reflects on kind of everyone else is like, this is the thing with the lower ring is that like, all the good things seem to leave eventually, leaving us with only the scraps. I take a sip of the tea and make a face. It's bitter. And it's both, representative of like, that's how she feels about the thing, but also the tea was better when Mushi was here. And now it's back to being the more kind of bitter tea that is not the greatest thing in the world. So interesting one here to just kind of have this happen where like it's this big date, it's Jin's big scene, and then she goes a few days without seeing him, finally goes to have the kind of reunion scene with him, and he's already left for the upper ring because of other stuff that's happened. And she's just like, oh, wow, that's sudden. And again, we get back to the idea of dreams, that like it is true, it happens to some people, but any positive thing in her life seems to be leaving her these days, and it's still the almost the harsh truth of the lower ring in Ba Sing Se as we end the chapter. But we go straight into chapter 18 here. So it's Xuan and Jin talking. This is him bringing her to the meeting kind of with the Silver Fangs, more high-ups. So he gives her some context on like, okay, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but like here's a better idea about what it is we're actually involved in. So the family apothecary, the Hu Yuan apothecary, is part of a syndicate, a group of business associates who banded together for protection. She brings up like, oh, a gang basically. And he's kind of like, not quite, but I guess, sure. You mentioned the black market before, but it's only a small part of it. We help each other out because we have similar interests, of course. And in her head, she's thinking like, okay, she roughly gets this idea. But he then kind of goes on and kind of gets across the idea that like, it's a bit more than just everyone acting for themselves, like you'd almost think gangs do, to help even the poorest of us who the others forget. From the street urchins to the newcomers. And she's like, from the goodness of your heart, is this really how this works? And he notes, I know some of the gangs are like that, but not us. You know my mother. Would she be affiliated with anyone who harms people? And Jin thinks about this and is like, no, your mother is one of the good ones, so I do kind of trust you kind of in that regard. He says, there are ways we ensure the money does not leave here and line the pockets of the officials. The black market keeps things moving from one ring to the next, for messages, things, even people to get in and out if they need to. They help us and we call in favors in turn. This is where we get the name. Does this altruistic society have a name? They're the Silver Fangs, he announces, with just a hint of pride, like he really believes in this cause. And I think that's the telling point here, is like the reveal that you get is that it's not this situation that like Chuen is involved separately from his mother in this. No, the family's involved. This is why that detail from before about like Jin's first delivery was him replacing Chuen's sister on the mission is like, oh, you know, the family's involved. And even Dr. Jan, who we know is you know, she runs a business in the lower ring, the apothecary, but she was perfectly fine with Jin kind of paying the bill kind of at a later point, you know. So she is one of the good ones. And so if she's involved in this, there must be something to this. There's a little bit of a almost Dao Fei aspect going on here with the idea of it is kind of criminal activity, but with a sense of honor to it, the kind of Robin Hood kind of esque thing. But it's interesting. Because Dao Fei doesn't really get mentioned, I think, in this book, as far as I'm aware. But it's leaning in that sort of direction here. And I think that's been clear from the get-go, is that the 2 deliveries she did, the people were basically testing her on both times. There wasn't really too much of a sense that what was actually happening was illegal. That the rules they were breaking was more of a, you can't buy anything for the Fire Nation because they're the ones who, you know, are the architects of the war, more thing than anything. Otherwise, it was just kind of messages and, you know, tell the people that, like, they have my vote, they have my support. Those are the things being sent back through this. And you kind of realize that, like, oh yeah, so the idea that they do dealings with, like, people at the university, at some of the places where the ladies in like the upper ring are kind of like trained. Okay, like it is a little bit more interlinked between the rings, and this is how, you know, there's a certain amount of stability in the lower ring, is that they group together, aware of their kind of tough situation in the city, and through this kind of criminal but not crazy criminal activity, they help facilitate things so that the worst off are kind of brought up to at least a reasonable degree. And you see the lower ring of the Ba Sing Se community kind of come together here, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, then we head to the actual meeting there. That was just an initial meeting, but kind of beforehand. Then he brings her through kind of the different sections of the city, the small academic district outside of Ba Sing Se University here. So I guess we're in the middle ring, basically. The shop Chuen stops in front of is one I've walked past hundreds of times on my errands to buy ink sticks for Gong Gong. There's a giant line turtle statue in front of the window display, is an interesting detail. But it says on the sign, good tidings, seals and stamps. So it's like they're going into this place that sells seals and stamps, and there's a description of all the stuff that they have here. It's quite impressive, as like a craftsman kind of type situation going on here. Then we meet the guy who kind of runs the place here, and she's like, is this the leader of the Silver Fangs? And he's like, Tangbo? Nah, he just works here. He made all the stuff on the shelves, but like he's not the leader of the Silver Fangs though. But I guess the idea is he is one of the businesses involved with the Silver Fangs, but it's not like he's the top leader guy. There's a little bit of teasing here because he knows Chuen, so he like teases him like about this. Who's this? You know, a pretty girl. Have you come to show her off? And Jin in her head, it's an interesting interaction here where she's like, oh, is he going to snap at this kind of suggestion from this guy like Lee did at the date, the she's not my girlfriend moment? But actually he's just like, nah, he's not bothered by the assumption. And he's like, is the boss in? Yeah. So they're ushered in kind of behind the back, into the back room, kind of behind the curtain. There's a calligraphy scroll on the back that has a single character written on it. And this is sort of important. This is straight out of the book. They do actually have this symbol as like a small picture in the book, just to kind of highlight this section here. Because you know, calligraphy is a focus and stuff like that. And so Jin is drawn to this because she knows the significance of it, because she knows calligraphy. And then this is where we're actually introduced to the leader of the Silver Fang. She appears kind of out of nowhere. You see it, the hidden meaning between the strokes. And Jin's like, I think so. And so the description of the leader here is a woman around Mama Wen's age, with soft features but a sharp gaze. Not as haughty as a madam, yet I can tell not much gets past her. What do you see? And she notices that like Chuen is gone, like he just disappeared in the middle of all this because she was so distracted by the calligraphy, of course, here. She just explains, oh yeah, I sent him off somewhere, that's fine. Jin gives her explanation. My grandfather always said every master calligrapher approaches his calligraphy with careful intention. Each character contains a story because of how it's shaped. The way each line is swept across the page can convey an image in the eye of the reader. This is where they show us the image. And she says, it's a representation of all that is in a book. Now, I believe this symbol specifically, literally, like kind of like means book. That's kind of like the translation, effectively, of it. But she goes into it a little bit more in depth. That like that's what it kind of means. The power of knowledge hidden in the pages and the dangers that could be contained within. And then she, in her head, is actually like, I don't mention the other layer the character alludes to. The one my father and Gong Gong frequently spoke of, having worked alongside officials and governors, about what they witnessed of the corruption that exists here. How in the Earth Kingdom, especially in the Court of Advisors, it is well known that words can cut even more sharply than the sword. So it's this idea of almost like the kind of mystery of a book and like how much is going on in there for good and also for bad, and that it also alludes to the idea of, especially within kind of Ba Sing Se within the Earth Kingdom, that there is so much corruption done effectively through administration, through like the books of how everything runs and stuff like that. So that's the kind of secret kind of society aspect to what's going on here. So the leader here mentions that Chuen spoke highly of you. He said you had a good head on your shoulders, the ability to think on your feet. I can see that. And she's in her head like, wait, he spoke highly of me? Really? Like, that's unexpected. I would have thought with the way he treated me, there wouldn't have been much good to speak of. And she still has this perception of him more as the person from like their first couple of meetings, rather than he's actually been quite different, I think, in a lot of the recent ones. And I think she has maybe been misinterpreting the way he's coming across in some of the very recent meetings they've had. But yeah, she says, come join me for a cup of tea. This is where she introduces herself. You may call me Aunt Sumi, S-U-M-I, though you may hear me addressed as Merchant Yan, Y-A-N, as she goes on. So the tea is described as sweet and nutty. It's roasted rice tea. And she explains that I had a mentor once who grew up with a taste for it after spending time at a Fire Nation outpost. And Jin's like, Fire Nation drink? Should I reject the taste? And immediately Ansumi is kind of like worried I'm a Fire Nation sympathizer, or worse, a Fire Nation spy. And Jin doesn't know how to respond to this. Like, what's going on? Have I said the wrong thing immediately? Has the meeting gone wrong, like, straight away? And in her head, she's kind of thinking the worst. Like, am I trying to somehow get involved working for the Fire Nation somehow? Is it worth it if that's actually the case? Now, straight away, I don't think it's maybe a super crazy cliffhanger, because, like, literally, without getting too much into chapter 19, it's immediately taken back of like, no, that's not the case. Like, I kind of misled you a little bit there. It's not actually like that bad. The organization is, as Chuen described it before, altruistic, ultimately trying to help people out. But it's just interesting that they end on this kind of cliffhanger of like Fire Nation so quickly after she's basically been on a date with someone she effectively knows is from the Fire Nation already. So that's the situation here. So we finally meet the leader of the Silver Fangs, and she's an interesting character. Like, there's obviously reveals from later on in the book about the deeper aspects of the Silver Fangs that make this kind of maybe a little bit more interesting in terms of what the overall truth kind of the situation is. That makes it like, okay, like, that's what's happening here. And I'll try and reference a lot of that stuff when we kind of get to the actual major reveal kind of later on in the book about that. But you're maybe already perhaps getting a little bit of a sense for it now, just with the idea of, okay, like, super heavy focus on lower ring and keeping the lower ring kind of stable, but then someone who has connections with people from the Fire Nation and is somewhat connected, like, with Fire Nation culture, like liking the tea and stuff like that. It kind of gives you a little bit of a sense for what's going on there, but I'm not sure you immediately figure it out at this point. I know I definitely didn't kind of make the full connection with the Silver Fangs right now, but you could see how the connections are maybe starting to form at this point. But yeah, they're the two chapters that I've got to cover for this one. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the aftermath to the Zuko date, and then the introduction stuff for the Silver Fangs. But yeah, let me know below in the comments. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.